Hi, second graders. Today's story is from Knowledge 4, Lesson 10, called Atalanta and the Golden Apples. Before we begin our story, I'm going to introduce our vocabulary words. Our first vocabulary word for today's story is the word resist. Repeat after me. Resist. Resist means to turn down or to say no to something. Our next vocabulary word is the word skilled. Say skilled. Skilled means gifted and able. Our last vocabulary word is the word terms. Say terms. Terms mean rules or conditions. Long ago, in a peaceful little corner of Greece, there lived a king and a queen who loved each other very much. Although their kingdom was not large or wealthy, they and all their people lived happily. This king and queen had a daughter, a princess who was intelligent, beautiful, and a skilled huntress. She also happened to be the fastest runner in the world. Her name was Atalanta. When she reached a certain age, Atalanta's parents told her, "One day you will become queen, and ruling this land is just too big of a job for one person to do alone. It is time for you to marry." To their surprise, Atalanta replied, "I can ask wise men or women to help me run the country. As for a husband, perhaps I shall have one someday, but for now, there's no one whom I wish to marry." The queen asked, "What about all those fine young men who come around asking to marry you? Surely there must be one." "They care nothing for me, mother," Atalanta replied. "They only want to marry me in order to become king one day." But the king and queen insisted. Finally, Princess Atalanta said, "Very well, I shall marry the first unmarried man who can defeat me in a foot race." "What?" her parents exclaimed. They tried to talk her out of the idea, but they could not. So at last they agreed to her terms and sent word throughout the land. As you might imagine, many young men came to race against the princess, hoping to marry her. She easily defeated every single one, enjoying herself tremendously. One day, after winning yet another race, she just kept running past the finish line for sheer delight of it. She did not know that looking down from Mount Olympus that day was the goddess of love, Aphrodite. The goddess thought, "She is making a joke of love. I cannot allow this to go on." Now at the same moment, a young man was walking along the same road upon which Atalanta was now running. The young man was a brave adventurer named Hippomenes. He was just returning from a long sea voyage, so he knew nothing of the princess's challenge. As Hippomenes walked along, he glanced ahead and saw the most beautiful young woman he had ever laid eyes on, running his way at an unbelievable speed. It was Atalanta, of course, and Hippomenes was looking at her. The goddess of Aphrodite was looking at him. And turning to her son, Eros, Aphrodite said, "Go shoot an invisible arrow of love into Hippomenes' heart, so that he will fall in love with Atalanta." So Eros did as he was told, and Hippomenes instantly fell in love with Atalanta as she ran by him. He thought, "I have never seen such joy on a human face. I would not have thought it possible, but I believe that I have fallen in love with her." At once he began to pray to Aphrodite for help, which is what the goddess had planned all along. She appeared before Hippomenes and told him that he must outrace Atalanta if he wanted to marry her. "But this is impossible, my lady," Hippomenes told Aphrodite. "I am a very fast runner, but I have never seen anyone move as Atalanta does." The goddess presented Hippomenes with 3 apples made of the purest gold that shone almost as brightly as the sun. "When Atalanta sees these apples, she will not be able to resist picking them up," Aphrodite said. "Here is what you must do." The next day, Hippomenes challenged Atalanta to a race, and inside his rather loose-fitting clothing, he had hidden the 3 golden apples. Before the race, he told Atalanta, "Your Highness, I want you to know why I'm racing against you." Atalanta answered him, "In order to marry a princess and become king someday." To her shock, he replied, "No, in order to marry the woman I love. She just happens to be a princess." Then he walked to the starting line while Atalanta thought, "There's something different about this one." Still, she took her place next to him, and a moment later, the race was on. Atalanta began to pull ahead almost at once, but Hippomenes drew one of the apples from inside his clothing and tossed it ahead of her, a little off to the side. The moment Atalanta saw the apple, she just had to have it. She turned and went after it. As she picked it up, she saw Hippomenes ahead of her, and losing no more time, she took off like a deer. Soon Hippomenes heard her footsteps closing in behind him. Drawing out apple number 2, he held it up so she would see it and tossed it back over his shoulder. She turned right around and ran back to get it, while Hippomenes kept running on. Grabbing the second apple, she saw Hippomenes halfway to the finish line. This time, Atalanta took off after him like a speeding cheetah dashing across the grasslands. Soon Hippomenes could hear her rapid footsteps getting closer, and he took out apple number 3 and threw it into a nearby field of tall grass. Of course, Atalanta went after it, hunting through the grass for the golden fruit, while Hippomenes kept running. This one, too, she held in the palm of her hand as she returned to the race. In all of Atalanta's life, she had never run as she ran then. Her feet seemed to not touch the ground. Faster and faster she moved, and closer to Hippomenes she came. She told herself, "Don't look back or you might lose a step." Now she was only 3 steps behind him, now 2, now just 1, and then she thought to herself, would it be so terrible if I did marry him? And as she thought that, Hippomenes gained a step and crossed the finish line before her. What happened after that? Well, I'm glad to say that Atalanta kept her word and married Hippomenes. And I'm even gladder to say that she had been right. There was something different about him, and soon she loved him as much as he loved her. Hippomenes never minded that Atalanta could outrun him. He was happy just to be the one running with her.